Welcome to the Linc Church podcast channel. You're about to hear a life-giving message from good friend Pastor Bevan Russell from Hillsong, South Africa. Open your hearts and lean in. I believe God wants to speak to you today.
It's always a little bit surreal for me speaking in church in South Africa because I didn't grow up in church in South Africa. I didn't go to church at all, and I wouldn't have called myself a Christian and really kind of entered into this journey of faith in London. So coming back, I feel like I'm such a different person, and it's a little bit kind of strange, but you know, I know you guys are going to enjoy it and embrace me and make me feel good because, you know, it's not awkward at all. Yeah. Lions. Why would you even talk about the Lions? And it's crazy. I've got to say this. I did say this to the service earlier. Bit of a disclaimer. I do apologize if you think my accent's a little bit strange. I left 18 years ago, so lived in the UK for 11, and then have been living in Australia for 7. And Australian accent's easy to pick up. So if you hear a little twang every now and again, don't judge me, okay? I'm not one of those people that went away for like 3 weeks, picked up an accent, and now kind of think I'm Australian. You know who those people are, you know? And I just want to say also, you know, it is a privilege for me to be here. I'm so thankful to Dylan and Tess for allowing me the opportunity. It's funny, they're kind of in Cape Town at the moment, so we kind of crossed over. I was here specifically for a wedding, and maybe you can hear my voice is a little bit kind of shot. It was kind of like a school reunion because I've been away for so long and haven't been able to connect with friends, but I had the cool opportunity to actually lead the service for a good friend of mine. And a bit of a flashback to the past, because not much has changed. And they definitely made the most of the weekend, let me just tell you that. So yeah, it was interesting being the priest at this wedding ceremony. But I felt like such an old person because my voice is all coarse because like the music was so loud. I'm trying to talk to people, and so I'm like shouting, you know. I doubt they could hear me because, you know, they were definitely, just definitely ensuring that they weren't dehydrated. So I apologize for my voice. In February 2011, we were asked by Brian Houston, who's the global senior pastor of Hillsong Church, to move from London, where we were living at the time, to go to Australia, to go to a small town on the east coast of Australia, just north of Brisbane, a town called Noosa. And we were never thinking about moving to Australia. It was kind of not really a part of any of our plans. I'd been there a few times and loved it every time I'd visited. But we were actually 7 years ago planning on coming back to South Africa. And absolutely what Mark said, we've never been able to shake South Africa. I didn't leave for any other reason, just to kind of go traveling for a couple of years, and it ended up being 18. Because we truly believe in the potential of this nation. We love South Africa. There's nothing like this country. But because it was kind of like an out-of-the-blue request, we settled on the idea that it would just be a great adventure. It would be a phenomenal opportunity to pioneer something new. We were being asked to go and start a new Hillsong campus in that part of the world. And so for me, I'd formulated my objective. I had really clear in my mind what I wanted the end to be. And, you know, I had this sense that we were going to go there. And I was determined, I was ambitious. Really, I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to see results. And so with having that so clear in my mind, I remember walking into one of our very first gatherings that we had. And similar to this environment that you walk into, there was a band and there was a row of singers on the front. And as I was looking around, I noticed one person in particular just didn't fit. Well, in my mind at least. Because I was so set and so determined on what I felt church should look like, I looked at this person and thought, this just doesn't necessarily fit my objective and my end, okay? So I kind of walk on down. I talked to this lady, probably the first conversation I'd ever had with her. I'd never really given her the time to connect, and nor had I taken the time to really find out more about who she was. I'd made a judgment call very much based on the surface and very much about my end result. And I looked at her and I said, Jenny, her name was Jenny Hales. I said, Jen, I actually don't feel like this is the best role for you to kind of be out here front and center. I reckon it would be better if you kind of went more behind the scenes. And I know some of you are kind of judging me right now, and you've got every right to do so. I want us to think about a question. How often do we use people as a means to our end? In other words, we have an objective, we have a desired result. We want to produce. And when we see people, we see them purely as a means to achieve that result. I want us to have a look at the Bible quickly, a passage of scripture in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to come back to Jenny in a moment. Because the beautiful thing about Jenny is that even in that moment, Jen, she was in her 50s, I was 32 at the time. She kind of just looked at me with a smile in her face and just graciously agreed to doing what I asked her to do. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus speaking. He says this, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Verse 20, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. The Message paraphrase says it like this. It makes an interesting statement. It says, don't hoard treasure down here where it gets eaten by moths or corroded by rust or even worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven. Stockpile treasure in heaven. Now, I've heard this type of thing spoken about previously, and certain concepts around what treasure in heaven looks like. My intention is not to kind of get into a big theological debate around that. However, I would know that this passage is talking about two states of being. One is speaking about the very natural state that we find ourselves in right now. This temporal state where essentially we have the opportunity to accumulate stuff. But stuff, when it's all said and done, is temporary. But then it's also in reference to an eternal state. In other words, that once this life expires, naturally speaking, we believe, and I believe wholeheartedly, that there is something next. There is an eternity before us. So it's speaking of treasure in two contexts. One naturally and temporally, and one spiritually and eternally. But that statement, stockpile treasure in heaven. Like, what does that actually look like? What does that mean? I felt like personally, I was sitting in a particular environment not so long ago where this passage, it became real for me. And I was sitting in a funeral service. Not necessarily the most pleasant topic to talk about on a Sunday morning, I appreciate. But it's the reality of life, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, this life will expire. And for many of us, we've tasted that expiration personally in our worlds. But sitting in a funeral, it is difficult not to contemplate what is actually valuable in life. And it's fascinating in a funeral what gets said as much as what doesn't get said. especially in reference to the person that has been lost. When you think about a funeral, I have very rarely heard a loved one get up and talk about the significant impact of the person's car that they drove in their life, you know? I've yet to hear somebody give this reference to the address that a person found themselves in and this eternal significance of the residential location of the loved one that had been lost. You don't hear people harping on about the educational status or the letters next to their name or not next to their name. You don't necessarily hear about the digital footprint that somebody has. Like, I was shocked in this funeral because this funeral was actually for a friend's gran. I didn't know the lady personally, but we were there supporting our friends. So I didn't know who this lady was. I was shocked that they did not talk about her Instagram followers. Why wouldn't you talk about that? Isn't that important in life? Your social media impact. No, in a funeral, people get up and they speak about the person. They speak about the loss of the person and how the person lived in such a way that the person had an impact upon their life. And that's what happened in this particular funeral. It was remarkable. I'd never heard about this lady other than she was my friend's gran. But when people got up and spoke about it, she made such a significant difference, and interestingly enough, in Durban. But then it got incredible because one by one, people started standing up and reading out emails and letters and SMSs and all those sorts of things about how this lady's life was lived in such a way that she evidenced her faith in Jesus in such a profound impact that these people ensured that in their remembrance of her, they noted the fact that her faith was a catalyst to them finding faith. And one by one, they spoke of their relationship with God through faith in Jesus because of this one lady who lived in such a way that it was a catalyst to them opening up their heart to eternity. And you see, for me, that's when this passage of scripture became real. Because I'd never fully comprehended this statement, stockpile treasure in heaven. But as I bore witness to these people giving testimony to their salvation, which speaks not just of a temporary state, but speaks of eternity, I realized that this old granny, she lived in such a way that she stockpiled treasure in heaven. Because when you think about it, you know, when time is up, what's coming with us? Like, really, what is of eternal value in our current natural state? Like, we're not taking our cars, as awesome as they are, like, or maybe not so awesome. Like, we're not going to take our house. However, that could be a great thing that we can hand down into future generations. We're not taking our education. We're not taking our accolades. I don't know, if you won the 100-meter sprint in 1974, you're not taking that trophy with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, so what is the one thing? The one thing that has the potential for eternal value? There's only one thing, and it's people. You see, I believe that people are the true treasure. Of anything that is of potential value in our life, we so often overestimate certain things, when ultimately one thing and one thing matters, and that is people. If you want to put a title to a message, you can title it The True Treasure. Or you can title it, If People Are the True Treasure, I want to be a gold digger. I want to be a gold digger. Some of you already are. I'm just joking. Hey, take it easy. So some people nudging their partner, you know. But you know, people are the true treasure. Ultimately, that is of the greatest value. And if that is true, I want to be someone who lives my life in such a way that ultimately is about drawing the best out of people. That is ultimately about exploring and identifying the gold that lies within every single human being, whether they seem to be perfect or not, whether they look like me or not, understanding that their true value is eternal. And if I can play just one part, maybe not the whole part, but just one part, ultimately that we might stockpile treasure in heaven. You might be sitting here today and thinking, like materially, you wouldn't consider yourself to be wealthy. And maybe that's true, materially. But can I tell you, if you just have one person in your life right now, just one human being, I would consider you to be extremely wealthy. Because people are the true treasure. And so if we want to be gold diggers, if we want to bring out the best in people, I just want to give you 3 ingredients that I believe that if we lived in such a way, that we could bring out the best, that we could identify the treasure, and perhaps you and I could stockpile treasure in heaven. Just 3 ingredients. The first one is this. If people are the true treasure, I think about treasure, my mind automatically goes to the Pirates of the Caribbean. I know, a little bit weird, I know, I'm sorry, but it's just the way my mind works, you know, because I think treasure, I think pirates, patch, are, you know. You think about a pirate movie, or it's always about finding treasure, you know. But the crazy thing is in most pirate movies, they might find the treasure, they might identify the potential to treasure, but then they find this treasure chest, and ultimately, it's locked. There's no key. It's like this anticlimax, and now they're going to build it up again to try and get this thing unlocked. I reckon right now there are people in your world where there is gold, there is treasure. And perhaps just because of circumstance, perhaps because of stereotypes, perhaps because of stigmas, perhaps because of past experience, they're closed up and they're locked. And the only way that we're going to unlock that is humility. Humility is the key. I'm not sure what you think about what humility is, and I feel like within Christendom, we've done humility a disservice because we have made it about materialism. In other words, if we kind of lack material, stuff that makes us humble, humility is so much more about the heart and the position of your life. I feel like the best way to describe humility, it's not so much thinking less of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, in the context of faith in God, we need to understand that we are created by God. And therefore, we are created with greatness within us. That within every single one of us, there is God potential. There is God majesty. There is this wonderful thing that exists within every single one of us. So humility is not thinking less of yourself. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm so bad. No. It's just thinking of yourself less. Because how true is it that we can get so consumed with ourselves? I mean, we've even got a word to define it now. A selfie. I mean, like, you go through some people's social media feeds and you're like, oh, you've been nowhere except for on your own face. Like, you know? So we are so preoccupied with ourselves. Humility is actually taking the attention off yourself and putting it on someone else. To be humble is essentially to elevate the interests of others above yourself. Have a look at how the Bible speaks about humility. Philippians 2, verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. It's undeniable that the world would be a better place if we lived according to biblical humility, where we elevate the interest of others above ourselves. And I can guarantee you, if you're aiming to make a connection with someone, which is absolutely vital, if we're going to be gold diggers, if we're going to be ones who bring out the true treasure in people and ultimately stockpile treasure in heaven, can I tell you one of the greatest ways in which we can connect with other human beings is just be humble. Instead of talking, listen. Instead of stating, question. It's just to live in such a way that we appreciate that perhaps we can actually elevate the interest of someone else, which ultimately is going to open their hearts. And as they open their hearts, we identify the true treasure. So that's the first ingredient. Humility is the key. The second ingredient is encouragement that shapes. Because we might identify the treasure. We might unlock it through humility. But you would know, some people, most of us, are kind of like a raw product. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's some potential in there. Maybe there's some treasure in there. It just needs a little molding. It just needs a little direction. It just needs a little shaping. Encouragement is going to shape. I don't know about you, but we live in such a negative world. It's so easy to get negative. Like look for all the faults and the failings and everything that is going wrong. Like honestly, crazily enough, even this morning, because I stayed up in Nottingham Road, so I drove down this morning, I was listening to East Coast Radio. They've got a segment on East Coast Radio, which is a good news segment, which is awesome. But you know what the crazy thing was? Was this morning, their good news segment was that there was no bad news. I'm like, how did we get to this point where we think good news is no bad news? You know what I mean? Like we've got to choose through voices of life that we're going to see potential in people and we're going to encourage. Encouraging people is not flattery. It's not just saying nice things to make people feel nice. For me, when it comes to encouragement, I see it as putting courage into people. Because most often, we all live with an element of fear. We have desires, we have dreams, we have this potential within us, but fear is the great inhibitor. It stops us from actually fully reaching out and doing something great for God in this world. Imagine if we were people that could speak life and speak hope and speak courage. You can do this. There's greatness within you. You are a leader. You are an influencer. There is significance in your future. Come on, I'm with you. I'm beside you. You have got this. Courage. When was the last time you put courage into somebody? See, encouragement is going to shape. Humility is the key that's going to open it up. Encouragement is going to shape. And the third ingredient is gratefulness brings back the shine. Treasure, I guess modern day money could be considered treasure. So like imagine if I held up a 5 Rand coin. And this 5 Rand coin, it's kind of been in the market a little while now. It's exchanged a few hands. It's been through a few tills. It's kind of grown a little bit familiar in the world in which we live. And maybe just through circumstance and overuse, it's picked up a little dirt. It's looking a little bit grimy, looking a little bit tacky. I hold it up in front of you, but then right next to it, I put a 5 Rand coin that is fresh off the press, shiny. Which ones are we tending to be more attracted to? Typically, it's the nice, shiny, new-looking one. But are they of different value? They're of the same value. Okay, I'm going to get real for a moment, okay? Think about your current relationships. Husbands, wives, friends. Maybe you've had somebody in your life. They've been around for a while. Kind of been there. Familiarity's crept in. Maybe just through circumstance, tough times, challenges. Maybe there's a little dirt that's got on. And Maybe it's looking a little grimy, a little not what it once used to be. And next thing, out of the corner of your eye, a new 5 Rand coin pops up. I guarantee you, if you just took a moment, chose to be grateful, you would soon realize the value is equal. When was the last time you said thank you? Like genuinely thank you. It's that person that is in your life, and maybe not even necessarily one who's regularly in your life. When was the last time that you pulled up at a petrol station and a petrol attendant who is a human being, who is a person who is divinely created by God as you are, somebody who perhaps you might consider beneath you or not necessarily within your friendship circles? Or when was the last time you looked at that person and you looked at them in the eye and you said thank you, genuinely? See, because there's treasure in them too. Gratefulness, it'll bring back the shine. So we've moved to Cape Town, and we were in Colk Bay, and there's a bakery in Colk Bay, which is kind of well known, and people had spoken to us about it. So, okay, cool. I don't mind a pastry or two. I'll go into this bakery. So a couple of us went into this bakery. I order a chocolate croissant, and my friends were still paying for theirs. So I kind of bite into this pastry. Like, it was good. It wasn't like life-changing good, but it was good. So I noticed behind the counter was actually a window, like a circular window that actually looked straight back into the bakery where people were baking, where people were working. So I'm just kind of sitting there casually and thinking to myself, this is good. So I see, and I just think, oh, it'd be cool. I'll just give them a little thumbs up. Like, that's all I did. Like, I didn't know if they could see me or not, but I just thumbs up, like, it's good, thanks, you know? Next thing, the bakery doors, like next to the till, like they fly open. This lady, she comes out like she looks at me and she just starts like calling me, like, come with me. I'm a little bit freaked out, okay? I've been living in Australia for so long. I'm like, I can't go back there with you. Like, health and safety. I haven't washed my hands. I've got a hairnet on. Like, what are you doing? Like, she was so insistent. But not just me. She calls all of us in. She calls us into the bakery. I kid you not. We walk in, and it was like we were running out of Ellis Park in the World Cup final. You know what I mean? Because they were like shouting. Just like going crazy. Like, the ladies were hitting the table. Like, it was, they were having the best time of their life, you know? We were just walked into this. And I'm like, I'm definitely not in Australia. You know what I mean? Like, welcome to South Africa. Yeah. But they were just so happy that I gave them a thumbs up. And so the baker, the lady, she's an old lady, okay? She looks at me and she says, you know what? I've been doing this a long time. I've been in this a long time. 5 Rand coin, maybe, you know, like there's a bit of dirt, maybe there's a bit of circumstance on her. And she looks at me, she said, this is the first time in a long time that somebody's just said thank you. And she said, like, I kid you not, she's like, I was actually considering finishing up. Like, I was done with this in a way. She said, from this moment, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing this. And all it took, thumbs up. Gratefulness, it'll bring back the shine. Stop for a moment. See people as the true treasure. That's all we've got. You know, I made that statement or asked that question, how often are we using people as a means to our end? I feel like it's time, and it's a lesson that I'm learning, and I've learned it through Jenny, which I'll continue with the story shortly. I believe it's time that we stop using people as a means to an end and wake to the fact that people are the end. People are the result. People are our accomplishments. People are the success. And you think about it in your business endeavors, which can so easily become about the bottom line profit, which, listen, I understand. But ultimately, particularly as ones who are believers, who have received this great gift of salvation, ones whom God himself would consider us to be true treasures, so much that he would give his life for us. Surely we should be the ones, if there was anybody in this world, that we would not live determining our lives by the success of natural things, but we would always live based upon the success of significant spiritual, eternal things. And that is people. People are the true treasure. You know, Jenny, just a few months after that kind of exchange that I had with Jen, and she was so gracious to me. Like I was just a punk, you know, like I thought I knew everything and I had my objectives and I wanted to achieve my results. And so I just dismissed her. I never took the time to actually open up humility, that treasure that was within her. And, you know, she so faithfully contributed behind the scenes, like week in, week out. Jen came to us one day and she let us know that she had just been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. And we were shocked. Shocked because Jen was probably the healthiest and fittest lady I'd ever met in my life. I mean, everything about her was just, you know, she was at the top of her physical game, even at her age. I mean, she was a champion athlete nationally in her age group. She comes to us and she tells us about this diagnosis, and like it rocked me, you know. I started to think of how I just dismissed her and blah, blah, blah. And the beautiful thing is that over the course of the next little while, we built up this incredible relationship. And you know, I watched Jen through this journey and her faith, her authentic faith. I watched the way that she continued to love on people. I literally remember being on the side of her bed while she was at her worst. And the thing that she wanted to talk about most was other people. I remember one morning turning up at church in Noosa. At that stage, we didn't own our own facility, so we were setting up church, packing down church. I turned up at about 6:45 a.m., and there was a ramp, like a wooden deck ramp down into the entrance of church. And I see Jen at 6:45 a.m. And I promise you, she was hobbling like down the ramp. She could hardly walk. And she was a shell of her former self. I mean, she had undergone severe evasive surgery, chemo, radiation, you name it, every single treatment, and she was frail. But she's hobbling down this ramp. I look at her, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, you should be in bed and you should be taking care of yourself. And again, she looked at me with that smile. She said, this is what you asked me to do. This is my church. And she served and contributed humanity even at her worst. And Jen, for me, was a true gold digger. Jen was promoted to eternity not long after that morning. And I had the privilege to lead and conduct her funeral service. And people were coming up to talk about Jen, who I didn't know. She was, again, an athlete. And so some of the people that she competed with were talking. And again, I distinctly remember what was not spoken about. I distinctly remember that they didn't mention her car or didn't mention her house that she lived in. Didn't mention her accolades and her sporting prowess. They spoke about her faith, even though they themselves did not have faith. They spoke about her love for them. And they spoke about the grief that it wasn't so much about what Jen did as opposed to who Jen was. She was a gold digger. She saw true value in people. Here's where it gets crazy, okay? Months later, I reckon 18 months later, I'm at church, I come out of a service, and I notice a lady standing by herself, and she's like visibly shaken. There's something going on. She's by herself, and so I'm a little bit intrigued. I've got to be honest, as a pastor, just letting you into some honesty moments. When you see somebody kind of navigating something, you have a moment where you either got to decide to go to them, or you can kind of just like somebody else will take care of them. Mark never does that, by the way. Just me. But on this, I felt so strongly about to go and talk with her and just find out what was going on. So I meet her, and I'd never seen her before, and I ask her if everything was okay, because I'm thinking something bad's happened, because she's like, something's going on. She explains to me it's nothing bad. If anything, it's something great, because she can't explain it, but she's just had the most phenomenal experience in church. And I asked her whether she had been here before, and she's like, this is my first time in church. So I'm like intrigued. Okay, well, how did you get here? How did you find out about it? She's like, well, I remember a friend of mine used to talk about church and talk about faith. And then she says, it's going to sound weird, but I was walking my dog this morning on the beach, and I genuinely felt as if my friend was asking me to go to church. So, okay, listen, again, I'm a little bit cynical, so I'm thinking, okay, shucks, has she been drinking? She's like, yeah, I just had this impression that my friend was asking me. So, is your friend with you? This is a person here. No, she's not here. Oh, is your friend like in town? Is she around somewhere? No, my friend's no longer with us. Your friend, is she in another city? No, she passed away. She passed away about 18 months ago. See, my friend, she navigated a journey with cancer. She passed away. But I remember her talking about her love for Jesus and her love for other people. And I remember the people that were around her when she passed away. And I had this distinct impression that she was inviting me to come to church. Her name was Jen, Her name was Jenny Hales. And like in a moment, I'm thinking to myself, here's this lady, passed away 18 months ago. She moved from a very natural state to an eternal state. But the way in which she lived her life, she was a gold digger. And essentially, in her temporary state, she had an impact on another person's temporary state, which has ultimately led to her stockpiling treasure in heaven. Because in one moment, this lady's eternity was changed. And it came simply through another person seeing her as valuable. People are the true treasure. Humility is the key. Encouragement is going to shape it, and gratefulness, that's going to bring back the shine. I don't know about you, but I want to be a gold digger. And I want to stockpile treasure in heaven. Can I pray for you guys? Would you mind closing your eyes?